You've just been on a tour of Queensland with the Shadow Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, a fellow Queenslander. How was it? Was it a sobering experience?
Well, it was really good, Laura. We had a road trip from Brisbane to Townsville, so about 2,800 kilometres all up. And the pleasing thing was, I suppose, first of all, just how Queenslanders were willing to have a chat to us. So whilst our vote really suffered in those parts of Queensland, they were really appreciative that we were there, down the main streets, having a chat to people in small business, a couple of pub tests along the way, Laura. And people were willing to have a chat to us. So I think Anthony Albanese, as the new federal Labor leader, has set the tone right for us in terms of saying that we want to get out there, we want to listen, but we also don't want to make sure that we're taking the fight up to the government at the same time. So, yeah, it was a really valuable experience and one that I'm sure Jim will get some benefit out of as well.
Were you able to ascertain just why you've got the lowest Senate vote for Labor, I think, in history, and Queensland Labor has a primary of around 25?
Yeah, and the news about the second Senate spot, losing the second Senate spot with Chris Ketter, came through whilst we were on the road up there, Laura, so that really hit home how low the vote was. And whilst I haven't had a good look at the result yet, I think my early assumption would be is that the low vote through Central and North Queensland was probably a key determinant in us losing that second vote, that second Senate seat. So I think that's something that we need to have further look at. But I think there's a couple of things that were really evident. And one is obviously around mining and particularly the issue of Adani. And I think some wishy-washy language from federal Labor really hurt us. And the LNP ran a very, very effective scare campaign. And there's no doubt that was a significant factor.
Wishy-washy language on what in particular? Sorry.
Well, I think when it comes to Adani, I think that there was scepticism in those parts of Queensland about whether Labor backed the project or not. In simple terms, and I think that therefore those people who rely on coal for their jobs and those regional economies that rely on coal, they didn't see Labor as standing up and representing them. So they obviously made a choice at the election that those regional communities had a brighter future under the LNP. And that's one that I'm keen to arrest because I know the record of the LNP in these parts of the world when it comes to industrial relations, when it comes to infrastructure, that I know that the Labor Party can offer these communities a brighter future, but we've got the challenge over the next 3 years to articulate that and reassure people about what that looks like.
So now the language has changed. Do you believe that you support Adani, you support those coal jobs unequivocally?
Well, I think Joel Fitzgibbon has set the tone for federal Labor as the new Shadow Resources spokesperson, and I concur with his language around this. And I think that ultimately the decision around Adani will be made by the current federal government and the current state government. We won't have a role to play in that. But if it stacks up, it's not for us to determine commercial interests about whether they can make projects work or not. We've just got to make sure it meets all the approvals environmentally.
Well, Anthony,
and if they can do that, then they should be allowed to concede.
Can I just bring this up with you? A lot of people looking at this Adani mine don't see how it can actually stack up without some kind of a taxpayer subsidy. Would Labor support some level of taxpayer support for Adani?
Absolutely not, and nor should we, and I don't think the Queensland public would want them to either. And we've been absolutely clear on that, is that it needs to stack up on their own terms. But if the company can do that, then they should be allowed to proceed, provided they've ticked all the other boxes. And I think that's the thing for me, is that we aren't the ones who will determine a commercial project. That's up to companies. We don't dictate to them whether they can make it work. It's got to be up to the companies themselves, and the governments have got to set the terms and conditions.
What are Queenslanders telling you about the package of tax cuts which was central to the government's re-election strategy?
Well, I think when you say it was central to their re-election strategy, I don't think it was an economic plan they put forward. It was basically a tactic to get themselves through an election campaign. So I don't think we should give them too much credit for how much thought they put into it, and I wouldn't call it an economic plan. I'd call it an election plan, basically. But having said that, I acknowledge that they won the election, and the thing that is crystal clear for me, having been through regional Queensland, is just how tough the economy is. I was from Brisbane to Townsville this week, and then the week before, Jim and I were in Cairns as well. So we've basically covered all the key regional towns along the coast over the last week and a bit. And there's no doubt that those economies are screaming out for having some more money for people to invest and spend locally. Even a place like Cairns, which on top-line figures looks as though it's doing well, they could really do from a boost in tourism, which the numbers have been a bit bleak over the last 12 months. So I've got no doubt that stage one of the tax cuts are desperately needed. And the government have broken their promise on that. They said that it would be in place from 1 July, and they're not going to deliver on that. So they had one plan for the election and they haven't delivered.
Well, are you going to deliver the entire package of tax cuts, though?
Well, I'm respectful of the caucus process. I think Anthony Albanese, as the new leader, is going to go down that path where we will have proper deliberations. So I'm not going to interfere with that.
Well, we've seen Peter Khalil, Joel Fitzgibbon, as you quoted before, declare their hand, saying, look, they're on board with what you've just said. Stage 1 and 2 is absolutely necessary. They're a little bit sceptical about stage 3. But if the government refuses, which they are refusing, to break up the package, Labor should support the passage of the package through Parliament. Is that your view?
Look, I'm going to express my view in the caucus as it's appropriate, but I share their scepticism around stage 3. Obviously, there will be another election between now and then, but I'm also know that the economic need is now. Who knows where we will be in 3, 4, 5 years' time, but what I do know is that the current government don't have a plan that is going to ensure that these regional communities in particular are going to be doing better in that period of time.
The CFMMEU, should it be deregistered?
Look, I don't think that the membership of the CFMEU should be punished for the actions of one person. There's a workforce out there that need representation from a strong union, and that is what happens in the vast majority of those branches around the country. So I don't think that the actions of one individual should penalise the hundreds of thousands of members that go about their working life and need the representation of a strong union as a result.
You think John Setka should go, not just from the Labor Party, but from the CFMMEU?
Look, all we can do, and I've been through these experiences with union officials in the past, Laura, and we control the Labor Party. Anthony Albanese is the leader of the Labor Party. He's made his position clear about John Setka should not be a member of the Labor Party. That is all he can do as our leader. I back him in on that, and I think our colleagues do as well.
I mean, there's a lot of spin going in the union movement, and some supporting John Setka are certainly, I would say, a loud minority. Would you agree with that assessment that we've seen, yes, some go in and support John Setka and saying that there shouldn't be interference from the Labor Party, but many of the unions that have remained silent actually do want to see him go. They represent women, a lot of women in the union movement, for example. And I'm happy for those unions to express their view, but at the end of the day, it is a matter for those unions, the ACTU, the CFMEU, to make their call. And I do note that the membership of unions are largely responsible for who their leadership is. So it really is a call for those members. Senator, you said that on your tour of Queensland that voters were happy to talk to you. If you had to put this loss down to anything other than Adani, what would you change?
Look, I think what became clear from the feedback that we got is that the mother of all scare campaigns that the LNP ran around a number of issues really took hold in regional Queensland. So the scare campaign they ran around coal mining, the scare campaign they ran around tax really hurt us in those parts of Queensland. So I think there's a real lesson for us in terms of, one, the policies that we take to the election to ensure that they are grounded in Labor values, but we've also got the ability to get out there and sell them convincingly and not allow for a scare campaign from the other side to take hold. They didn't have a big agenda, the LNP. They spent all their time talking about us, but we obviously gave them that opportunity, and we didn't future-proof those policies to ensure that we could round off any scare campaign that they were waging against us.
Senator Anthony Chisholm, we thank you for your time. We'll speak to you soon.